It is a beautiful yet overcast day here in Halifax right now, about -8 degrees. No wind, which makes it a great day to be in the woods. So I've been working now for about an hour and a half, collecting up some firewood to have my lunch. That's the reason why I'm venting off some of the heat. And I'm about to get my fire going, and I thought I'd share with you a product that was sent to me by Uberleben, and that is the Kraftig. The Kraftig 8-inch Ferrocerium Rod. If you're interested in seeing how it performs, stay tuned. Okay, so here we have the Kraftig Ferrocerium Rod with its attached striker provided by Uberleben to me for testing. And you know, when they sent this to me, it's not something that I was expecting or looking for, but when it arrived, I said, man, massive, 8-inch long, heavy. I'll put the weight in the specs below. I wonder how it performs. It came with a hole drilled on it and this piece of shock cord already through it. Now, just to show you the striker, I did add a little Night Eyes carabiner just so I can remove it. I find it easier to strike if it's separated from the ferro rod, but I have been playing with it. I wanted to compare it against my Ferrocerium rod that I carry on a regular basis. So normally when I go in the woods, I carry 2 Ferrocerium rods plus other redundant fire starters. One is always attached to my belt. You can see I have a cord where this is attached to my belt, not to my pant loop, but to my belt, and resides in my pocket. And it is a 1/2 inch by 5 inch Ferrocerium rod. It's got well used. Every once in a while I do have to smooth it off because of the chatter. And I have some Gorilla Tape, 1-inch Gorilla Tape wrapped around the end of it, and a piece of cord to give it a handle. So this is what I compared it against. I said, you know, what is it? The same, similar, different? I needed to know that. So here's my understanding of Ferrocerium rods, and that is essentially there are 2 types of Ferrocerium rods available. And the first ones, and I know they're also referred to as mesh metal, and which one has the proper designation, I don't know. I'm sure somebody will tell me. But there are 2 that I'm familiar with, and I think they all fall into these 2 categories. And the first category is probably the one that's been around the longest, and that's the one that's epitomized by the Light My Fire. And there's a number of models of Light My Fire Ferrocerium rods, and they have a different means of being used than do the rest of them. They're the ones that you can come up with very little short strokes and get some shavings to ignite with short strokes. As you can see, that's really difficult to do on this type of Ferrocerium rod, is to get that thing to light with that kind of a leverage stroke. Then there's the other ones, and I think pretty much all of them come from China. And if somebody wants to correct me on that, please do, but I believe most of the other Ferrocerium rods come from China. So what's the difference? Well, one is price, and that's the reason why I carry the ones from China, is because I can get 2 or 3 of them for the price of one Light My Fire rod. And these 5-inch ones seem to be about the best in terms of the size that I'll carry in my pocket, although I do have smaller ones. And what I've found is that the ones from China appear to be a much harder compilation of metals, the different types of metals that go into them, the magnesium and the iron and those things that are in there, and they require more of a high-speed stroke. And rather than that little bit of a flick that you can often do with the Light My Fire, these require a bit of speed to get any sparks off of them. So the longer the rod, the more likely you are to get a massive strokes on them. So when I got the one from Kraftig, that's what I wanted to know. Is this something similar? And yeah, it's the type that takes the longer stroke. That would indicate to me that it's made in China. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the other difference I understand between the 2 rods are the shorter ones may give you globs, or the Light My Fire style may give you globs of molten metal easier in terms of the stroke that's on them, but it's not as high a temperature. So some materials seem to ignite better with higher temperatures. Now I've got a piece of very aged birch bark right here in front of me that I picked up off of the forest floor. So it is cold, it's probably got a little moisture in it, and it's damp. So that's what we're going to try and do today, is see if we can't get it lit with the Light My Fire, or excuse me, the Uberleben Kraftig. I'm sure I can. It's just going to take a little bit of prep work, so let's get that done now. Okay, when working with birch bark, especially older birch bark like this, which is the harder, if you get the real feathery stuff, maybe you don't have to do that. But when working with birch bark, the goal is to see if you can't raise a little bit of fine feathery material, something that'll catch a spark. So the more exposed surface area that you can raise, the better. And yes, I am working right on top of the ice here, but I'm getting some material raised here. Take your time. Get a little bit of raised up like that. A little easier if I work away from myself, so I'll turn it around. Better chance you'll be able to see what's happening here as well. Alright, so that's not a lot, but that should be enough to get it started. Now, this is not the piece of birch bark that I'm going to be using to transfer into my fire. What I'll have is another piece of feathery stuff that I'll be able to light off of what starts on top of this piece of birch bark. So, I will use the Uberleben with the striker. And I'll tell you, the secret to using a Ferrocerium rod, I don't think it makes any difference what type or how big they are or anything else, is the striker. You need a good striker. And it can be anything that's harder than the rod. So a rock, piece of glass, anything that's harder. Most people like to use the back of their knife. And I will show you that this knife that I have here will throw a lot of sparks. The one from Uberleben does have a nice raised burr, which will work. Not as well as the back of my knife, but that's the one we're going to do for testing today to show that it will work. So my method is to plant my rod right in the middle of the fluffed up birch bark, and then just do a little bit of pumping. This way I get the most concentrated source of sparks right in the right position. Sometimes it works quickly, sometimes it takes a little longer. In this case it took a little longer because, well, like I said, it was cold and frozen and old. So birch bark will burn, sometimes it just needs a little bit of encouragement. And that is how the Uberleben Kraftig works. Alright, let's wrap this video up. So a few closing thoughts. The Kraftig by Uberleben, and I'm going to provide the links to Uberleben where you can purchase this on their website as well as on Amazon. It's an 8-inch Ferrocerium rod, works very much like all the other Chinese Ferrocerium rods. It does have some advantages for somebody who wants to carry one big piece of metal, because that's what it is. One of the things that I like about this is the fact that it has the hole drilled through it to allow this piece of shock cord to go through. As a result, I don't have to wrap anything around it or set it in a piece of fatwood or antler or anything else in order to get a purchase on it. I can just use it as is. And with the one I carry in my belt, of course, I have reduced the overall 5-inch to 4-inch by wrapping some duct tape around it. So that's a little advantage to having one this big. The other advantage is it's easy to use both ends of it, and I have done that, is use that end of it as well, just to try to get some even wear on it. I don't think I'll ever wear this out, to be quite honest. This thing will probably last a long, long time. Do you know, when you're using Ferrocerium rods, something you may notice over time is that they develop a little bit of chatter, and chatter is where your striker has bounced down it, and it looks like a little bit of a ladder or type of effect down the ferro rod. That tends to get worse and worse if you leave it unattended. It makes it a little harder to throw sparks. So this is just a little extra tip. What I've done in the past, not with this one because it hasn't needed it yet, but with some of my other ones, is sandpaper. Just a little bit of sandpaper rubbing up, not fast because it will produce sparks, but just sandpaper rubbing back and forth, and you take down a little bit of that chatter, and it makes it a lot easier to use your Ferrocerium rod. And of course they come coated with an antioxidant material that has to be scraped off before it starts, and they tend to oxidize if you haven't used them for a while, so it usually takes a couple strikes to get them ready for use again. So, good product. I can recommend this. It works as well as my other ones. It's just bigger, so there's more there. Something I can put in my backpack, leave there, and never have to worry about. I'd probably put it sealed in some type of plastic bag to make sure it doesn't get any corrosion from anything that may come in contact with it, like moisture. But yeah, that's probably the way I'll carry it. So if you're interested, the links are in the show notes below. But until I have something else to share with you, get out and explore. Take that path less traveled. It'll make all the difference. Bye for now.